Good morning everyone, and welcome to our succulent Christmas tree wall hanging tutorial. It's a bit of a mouthful. You can see here we've got your lovely frame and moss pre-made for you, and then you'll also have your lovely succulents in your kit. You should also have some stain, some tacky glue, a planting stick, and also a paintbrush to help doing your staining and tacky gluing, of course. And then you'll also have some natural twine for decorating if you like, some super glue, clay and wire to do your little berries, and you'll need to grab yourself a pair of scissors to help you create along the way. Let's get started. So to begin with, we're going to start with staining our wooden succulent tree. So what you want to do is open it up, of course, and you're just starting off with a light layer to begin with. Now I'm only going to do one layer in this tutorial, but if you like you can do double. Of course, with more layers, the darker that wood, sort of caramel wood colour you're going to get. But however, I like a nice light colour. And this probably will get on your fingers, but it does just wash off, so that's no stress. But just be careful not to get it on your clothes. Now I'm just going around and doing the outside rim first. You'll probably see here that when you get some of the moss on you, on your paintbrush, it sort of gives it a bit of a rough texture. So unless you want a rough texture, if you want that smooth texture though, try and keep it nice and clear away from the moss. Cool. So then you just go through and pretty much just paint the whole thing. Star as well. It's completely up to you if you want to paint it, not paint it. It's completely on you guys. Make it your own. Have fun. Cool, we're almost done, just doing the final touches, and you just let this sit aside for about 5 to 10 minutes, all depending on how much you've put on, of course. It is pretty quick to dry, which is great. Even chuck it out in the sun for a little bit, that should help it along the way. But that looks good to go. So moving along, so don't forget to wash off your paintbrush before you move along as well, because we'll be using that for our gluing. Don't want that stain to dry out. Now, moving along, we're going to do our little cute clay berries. So make sure you do have clean hands before starting with the clay, otherwise you will make it a little dirty. So what we're going to do is you're grabbing your 2 little blocks of clay and you're separating each of those into 4 smaller bits, and they're going to make up our little berries. Now, if you guys are wanting to do different sizes, I like to do some bigger ones, smaller ones, get a little bit of a thing going. I couldn't think of the word. But yeah, just go through and rolling up little balls. I think I'm going to do about 9 in this tutorial, so it's completely up to you guys. So you can roll away. just going through and cutting off different lengths of our wire, and that's going to be for the little sticks for our berries. So it'll help us secure it in the moss correctly. Now they're all about the same size. I've gone some a bit longer, some a bit shorter, but you might notice that once you've got it on, you might want to give it another trim anyway. So you're simply just going to push those up into the base of your berries, making sure it doesn't push through to your other side. I like to hold my finger and sort of push through, and that way you can feel the wire pushing through to the other side on your finger, if that makes sense. And that way you can pull it in a little bit and just seal over that top spot. It's quite hard to talk about over voice recording, so hopefully that made sense. And we're on to our last berry. Awesome. So now we're going to bake these cuties. Now you can see here we've got some balls from our other tutorial. I'm filming 2 at once. So they'll take about the same amount of baking time. Obviously the small ones will probably be a bit quicker, but sometimes you can be really surprised with polymer clay. So I'm going to put it in at, you can see 200, but that's because my oven's a bit bodge. And I'm going to put it in for about 6 minutes because it's preheated for a couple minutes already. Let's have a look. Oh, awesome. You can see that the coloring's already deepened up. Now that's your first indicator that's cooked. It might also smoke a little bit. And the final thing is when you prick it with your finger, it should have a little bit of resistance to the point where your finger's not going all the way through. But when baking polymer clay, watch it, watch it, watch it. Do not go out into the garden and get distracted, because it can, once it starts to cook, once it's at that cooked stage, it's only a matter of minutes before it goes completely black. So keep an eye on it. It's all about experimenting sometimes. Okay, enough about the clay. Moving on to the lovely succulent stage. You can see here we're just grabbing our planting stick, and I'm really just going through and creating holes for my succulents and then having a figure out of where I want things to go. You can see there that I pulled off a couple of leaves to create a bit more of stem to work with. Sometimes if it doesn't have much of a stem with the bigger ones, it's really hard to stick. So this helps with that. And of course the wire also helps hold everything in place a lot better as well. So for now I'm just going through and figuring out sort of where I want things to go, a rough idea. I'm not using any glue yet. I'm just going to put, about 8 or so down, just to give myself a good basis for what I'm going to go through. And then we can start gluing. Now, of course, you guys might be funny about color and sort of, sizes, arrangement. It can be very hard to do arranging succulents. But honestly, I think a lot of people get very concerned on making it look very similar to what I'm doing, for instance. So it's all about, as I keep saying, personal preference. Make it your own, guys. Have fun. It's a very relaxing process. I so enjoy it. Alrighty, I think we're almost at the gluing stage now because it's looking pretty good, a pretty good basis of the big ones for me. Awesome, so this glue that we're using is tacky glue, and it's a water-based, pretty much PVA glue, but it's a bit thicker so it holds a bit better. And it's also a bit quicker to dry. So you can see here, I'm just going through and I'm putting a good blob on each of the succulents. Obviously you want a bigger amount for your larger ones because they're obviously a bit heavier. But as you go down to your smaller sizes, you'll need less and less. Making sure that your sucky stem is pushed all the way deep into that moss. So the glue's firmly attaching and has a lot of surface area to attach itself to. Awesome. And now we're just going to go through and fill it in with the rest of our suckies. Now, while I have your attention, I thought I'd do a quick rundown of suckies. Now, of course, your packs should come with sucky care instructions, but it's good to chat about anyway. Basically, you can see that we're planting them in moss. Now, people are curious as to how they cope with that glue. So they cope surprisingly well. Basically, what happens is succulents store their moisture in their leaves so they can go a good period of time without receiving any water. And when planting in the soil or planting in the moss with the glue, That allows them that time to establish without withering away, like a normal plant would. So with that, it takes, 2 weeks, sometimes a month. It all depends on the season. You get little roots starting to sprout through and they grab themselves onto the moss, and that's when they start to absorb that moisture. Succulents really enjoy moss because they like to be completely saturated, just like a desert storm per se, completely saturated, and then they also like to dry out quickly and sit in that dry moss or soil for a few days. So with this one, I'd only water it about once a week and give it a good spritz and then let it completely dry out. And then the one big factor, go back to the watering. With rot, your succulents can rot if you give them too much water, so be careful of that. But sun, so you can see here, they're all nice and compact, and that's because they've been getting good sun. If you have it inside for too long, they will start to stretch a bit. So you need to be careful of that. Give it a couple of days of morning sun, but definitely morning. You don't want them to burn. But yeah, you'll notice when they stretch, they kind of grow taller and they're a little bit discolored. So it's not the end of the world, but it's not preferable for succulents. So, alright, I think I've talked enough about the suckies. Let's move on to this. What I'm doing here is I'm just chucking some super glue on, and that's just to ensure that the wire and the clay stays together. And then I'm just going to go through and just pop them in the holes, pop them in spots that I think look good. Sometimes this process can be a little bit frustrating for me because it can be hard to sort of distribute your berries evenly. If you're OCD, which I pick and choose, sometimes I can, sometimes I don't care. I think that's the last berry. Yes, awesome. Well, that looks fantastic. I hope you guys made beautiful little Christmas trees to hang on your walls. Thank you so much for buying one of our tutorials, and I hope you all have a Merry Christmas.